I spent the year traveling the country, interviewing working class Americans for my book, Second Class, and American Compass, which is one of the most important institutions in America today, generously supported my travel. And ironically, I spent all this time and all of their money to discover that what Orrin had written in his book in 2018 was correct. So I don't know if they think it was money well spent, but I certainly was glad to do it. And I want to tell you about two women that I met when I was reporting my book, who are in the book, profiled at length. The book is called Second Class: How the Elites Betrayed America's Working Men and Women. And when I was reporting the book, I wanted to answer two questions. Who is the American working class? And do they still have a fair shot at the American dream? And in my travels, I came across Amy, a certified nurse's aide who's gay and who is the head of her union shop in Florida, and Linda, a West Virginia Amazon driver who's a big fan of Trump. Now, in describing these two women to you, you probably would not think that they had a lot in common. What could a gay Democrat who's married to a woman have in common with a MAGA West Virginian? And the truth is, in fact, that they not only have a lot in common, but almost nothing distinguished their views. So let me tell you a little bit about these women. Amy works the night shift at a nursing home. It's her job to clean and change and turn the elderly so that they can spend their later years in dignity. She keeps them clean and fed and calm and warm, and I'm sure we can all agree that she is doing God's work. Amy and her wife Janet live in a home owned by Janet's mother, an evangelical Christian. Amy and Janet are the kind of couple that take in strays, stray dogs, grandchildren from children that they had in marriages before they met each other, a developmentally disabled nephew whose mother struggled from drug addiction, and for whom Amy found a job in the kitchen at her nursing home. Let me tell you a little bit about Amy's views. Amy does not like welfare. She's a firm believer that people have to work for a living. She's been at her job for 33 years, and she's extremely proud that her nephew, who is disabled, chooses to work rather than live off the government, which he could very easily do. Amy thinks parents who bring children to drag shows should be put in prison. She opposes abortion on demand. She opposes funding the war in Ukraine. She opposes the open border. And she is extremely against children having access to any kind of gender transition, medical, anything. Amy says that Trump undeniably put money back in her pocket, and actually her wife voted for Trump because she liked that he couldn't be bought, but Amy always votes for Democrats. So you might be wondering why somebody whose views are so conservative always votes for Democrats, and it's simple. Amy is the steward of her union shop, and she can't get a meeting with a Republican to save her life. And you might want to ask, well, why is Amy in a union? Well, before her shop organized, she was making $10.40 an hour, and her union got her and her fellow CNAs up to $18 an hour starting salary. I wonder if we can all agree that a person changing the diapers of the elderly so that we don't have to should be able to afford a home and to retire in dignity and should have access to high-quality health care. But even with her union, Amy does not have access to these things. I would like to pose a question to all of you. What is the conservative plan to secure Amy, who is doing God's work, the most modest version of the American dream? And right now, the answer seems to be step 1, kill woke. Step 3, American dream. That was the joke, by the way. I guess 12 minutes and 30 seconds. This is appalling. Let me reiterate that Amy is a conservative. She probably wouldn't call herself a conservative, but her views are moderate to right-wing. What is she being offered by the right? Now let me tell you about Linda. Linda lives in West Virginia, where she drives a van for Amazon. It's the best job she's ever had, and she has had many jobs. She dropped out of high school at 15 after getting pregnant, and she's worked ever since. She and her husband lost their home in 2000 after the factory he worked at all his life was shipped overseas to China, and things were very tough after that. The couple got into a mountain of credit card debt, but slowly Linda is paying that off, and she believes that with her wages at Amazon, she might even be able to buy a little bit of land in the coming years and put a double wide on it. That's her American dream. Let me tell you a little bit about Linda's views. Linda is extremely pro-gay. She was very upset when her sister kicked her nephew out of the house when he came out, and Linda made that very clear to her nephew that she would always stand by him. She was raised in the South, where her family had views about race that she did not share, and she is extremely proud of the fact that the country has moved in a different direction. Linda is furious at corporations for raising prices and contributing to inflation. She can't afford frozen pizza anymore. She is furious about homelessness, especially homeless veterans. She doesn't understand how such a rich country can allow its vets to be treated this way. She is very against supporting the war in Ukraine. She thinks it's appalling that lower income people can't get help with groceries or car payments because you need a car to get to work. And Linda believes that both parties have abandoned the working class. Our political system is designed to enrich the rich and to plunder the middle class. Now, you might think that with her class consciousness and her support for government intervention in the economy, Linda would be a Democrat, but she's obviously not. Linda hates both parties, but she really likes Trump. She can point to the specific policies that she felt helped hardworking Americans get ahead in the Trump economy, reshoring manufacturing, trade that favors the US, and in general, putting more money back in the pockets of working people so they can take care of themselves. The point to take away from this is that, like much of Trump's base, Linda is not a Republican. She wouldn't call herself a Republican. She would call herself a Trump voter. And I'm telling you about Linda and Amy because they represent what I found throughout my year reporting second class. I spoke to about 100 people from across the political spectrum, people of different genders and races and family structures and religious creeds from all over the country. Yet despite the radical diversity of America's working class, I found a surprising consensus when it comes to ideology, as you can see in the stories of Linda and Amy. Though Amy voted for Biden and Linda voted for Trump, almost nothing distinguished their views from each other, either on social issues or on economic issues. On both, their views fell somewhere between the parties. They were socially conservative, but deeply, deeply tolerant. They wanted government intervention in the economy, but not redistribution. They wanted much less immigration and much more access to health care. The first politician to get to that combination is going to have an immediate 60% of the vote, by the way. Much less immigration and much more access to health care. 70% of Americans support this. The sad truth is that not only is there no party representing this aggressively moderate view, but the elites in both parties are actively undermining the things that working people feel most strongly about. This is how they would put it to me. We are often told that America is a nation divided. Politicians and media figures constantly bemoan what they call the near historic levels of polarization, painting a nation with left and right at each other's throats. And in some ways, they're right. There is a divide in America, but it is not between left and right. It's between an extremely polarized elite and a surprisingly unified working class. One of the most universal things I heard from working class Americans was the value of hard work. I can't think of a single person I interviewed who didn't tell me that working hard is a value they learned as children and is central to their identity. Work means dignity and independence and autonomy and pride and freedom. It means having something no one can take away from you, even when work is scarce, even when the conditions aren't ideal. The Marxist view of work as inherently exploitative, something people would ideally be freed from, has taken on new life on the American left, as well as even some corners of the free market right with ideas like universal basic income. But the working class Americans I spoke to did not view work as exploitative. They viewed the value of hard work through an almost spiritual lens as a precious inheritance that they had got from their parents. They remembered seeing their parents getting dressed to go to work every day to provide for their families. And it is essential to how they see themselves as Americans and a great source of pride no matter what they did. So there's this common view in the elites that no one wants to clean toilets, so we might as well just import people from failed socialist states to do that. And it's just nonsense. I interviewed a lot of people who you can meet in the book who get a lot of dignity from cleaning toilets, and yet they cannot afford to feed their families doing this work because they're competing with teams made up completely of illegal immigrants. The flip side of the dignity of work is the impatience that most of the people I spoke to have for people they view as choosing not to work and living off government benefits, and the corresponding inability of working families to get the little help they need, which would make their lives so much less stressful. No one I spoke to wanted to live off the government, either temporarily or permanently. They didn't think big government was the answer and spoke frequently about government waste and welfare fraud, things that they saw a lot of firsthand. What they did want was a system that rewarded those who work hard, who still can't get a foothold in the middle class. And there are millions of our fellow Americans, of our neighbors, who are in that category. So I just want to stress this. They didn't want redistribution. They wanted protectionism. As for who could get them there, I found a deep distrust of both political parties. The Democrats were seen as the party of the over-credentialed elites and the dependent poor, the party behind the mechanism that conveyed their hard-earned tax dollars to people defrauding the system. But the Republicans were seen as the party of the rich, the party of corporations, the side pimping out the working class to achieve the goals of conservative elites. So people showing up and saying, you give me your vote to fight woke, but I owe you nothing to help you feed your family in exchange for that. The majority of the people I spoke to didn't have views that fit with either party. Whether they voted for Democrats or Republicans, most people supported significantly limiting immigration, but also majorly expanding access to healthcare. They supported gay marriage and were very pro-gay, but also very, very worried about the spread of transgender ideology, especially the spread in schools. So to working class people, there's no LGBTQ unit. There are the gay people in their lives who they want to see treated with dignity and respect, and then there's the trans ideology that they really, really don't like and are really afraid of. They don't see that as a common thing. They were actually very anti-woke. They were very suspicious of the woke agenda that elites talk about, but it wasn't a topic they thought a lot about, or rather, it wasn't a topic they have the luxury of thinking a lot about. Instead, they thought a lot about housing and why they can't afford it. And extreme moderation, tolerance, and practicality threaded itself through their views. For example, I heard often from women that they personally opposed abortion and would never get an abortion, and it was against their views, but they would never judge another woman who was in a situation they couldn't imagine. So they were both pro-life and anti-banning abortion, right? Again, a view that really does not fit comfortably with either party. Most of all, the people I spoke to across the board were appalled at the divisiveness of our politics when they themselves were part of such a politically, ideologically, racially, and religiously diverse world. Working class Americans simply don't have the luxury of hating people for their political beliefs, nor do they have the appetite for it. I also found a deep, deep sense of betrayal. Whether people voted for Democrats or Republicans, they felt that they had been left behind, abandoned to fend for themselves in an economy that no longer saw their hard work as worthy of respect and the most modest version of the American dream. And whether they were Republicans or Democrats, they knew who was to blame: the people behind the offshoring of manufacturing and the importing of millions and millions of migrants to take their jobs, the people behind free trade deals and the ballooning administrative costs of healthcare and education, the people who defunded vocational training to give $200 billion to institutions that mint gender studies majors and then paid off their student loans so they could become podcasters. In short, I guess there was a second joke in there. In short, the elites under whose auspices a class divide has emerged in a country that likes to think of itself as classless. This is not to say that people saw themselves as victims. What they told me was that hard work and personal choices can go a long way toward overcoming circumstances and larger system-wide barriers to success. But people told me again and again, you can make all of the right choices and still only have a 50-50 chance of making it. Many, many hardworking Americans are struggling. These are our neighbors, and they work much, much harder than we do. And yet they cannot achieve the most modest version of the American dream due to an economy designed by experts to plunder the middle class. America has broken its contract with the working class, on the right with trickle-down economics, and on the left with the woke ideology. And, you know, there are ideas on the left that seem to us like they were designed, you know, as an affront on traditional values. But oftentimes these views are actually an alibi for the dispossession of the working class. And I'll just give one example quickly, and I could talk about this more in the Q&A, but the narrative of toxic masculinity, right? It's not an accident that this developed exactly around the time that an economy was being designed by experts to make it impossible for a man to support a family with labor around physical brawn, right? That is an alibi. They criminalized the people who used to be their base, who they were selling out for profit, effectively. And so much of the woke ideology operates that way. White rural rage, right? This is an alibi for the Democrats for having abandoned labor. But we can fix it. And you heard some amazing ideas. I mean, this man is the future of the Republican Party if it wants to have a future in this country. These were amazing, amazing stuff. The second half of my book has more along similar lines of just completely nonpartisan solutions, policy solutions that could be enacted tomorrow that would make a huge impact on working families. Here's the case that I want to make to you. If you are a conservative, this should be incredibly important to you because working class people agree with you on the woke stuff. They agree with you on most of these cultural battles. They agree with you on welfare. They agree with you on the cultural battles that you have the freedom to wage because your economic concerns have been taken care of. And empowering the working class should be a priority for any religious people praying next to folks who can't sleep at night because of their bills, obviously. It should be a priority for anyone who enjoys living in a democracy. You cannot have a stable democracy without a middle class, which is where we're headed. But especially for conservatives, this should be a priority. It's the economy, stupid. Thomas Frank got it exactly backwards in What's the Matter with Kansas. The truth is that millions and millions of working class Americans who agree with you on cultural battles are being held hostage by the Democratic Party over things like support for unions and healthcare access. These absolutely must be facets of a pro-worker conservative party, morally, spiritually, but also politically. Thank you very much.